The story of the 1985 Roosevelt dime begins many decades before its actual minting because the journey of this small American coin is deeply tied to the history of the United States, the evolution of coinage, and the legacy of President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, whose influence reshaped the nation during one of its most difficult eras. To understand the 1985 dime, we must travel back to the origins of the Roosevelt design, which started in 1946 when the United States Mint introduced this new dime to honor President Roosevelt shortly after his death. Roosevelt had led the nation through the Great Depression and World War II, and his leadership made him one of the most influential presidents in American history. The dime was chosen to honor him because of his direct connection with the March of Dimes, a nationwide campaign that raised money to fight polio, the very disease he suffered from. The original design by John R. Sinek featured a portrait of Roosevelt on the obverse and a torch flanked by an olive branch and an oak branch on the reverse, symbolizing liberty, peace, and strength. Over the years, the Roosevelt dime went through changes in composition design and minting techniques, and by the time we reached the year 1985, several important developments had already shaped how the dime was produced. In 1965, due to rising silver prices, the United States Mint removed silver from dimes and other coins, shifting to a clad composition made of copper and nickel. This change greatly affected all Roosevelt dimes from 1965 onward, including those minted in 1985. By 1985, the United States Mint was operating three main facilities that produced circulating coins: the Philadelphia Mint, the Denver Mint, and the San Francisco Mint. However, in 1985, San Francisco produced only proof dimes intended for collectors, which means regular business strike dimes came only from Philadelphia and Denver. During this period, the demand for circulating coinage remained steady and millions of dimes were produced each year. The 1985 Roosevelt dime reflects the economic conditions of the mid-1980s, when the United States was experiencing technological growth shifts in industry and changing consumer habits. Despite these major national developments, the dime itself remained consistent in both design and function, continuing to be an essential piece of American commerce. We can now look into how the 1985 dime was minted and what distinguished it from previous years. At the Philadelphia Mint, 1985 dimes were produced without a mint mark, since Philadelphia did not use the P mint mark on dimes until 1980. And even after that, certain years still followed older practices. Philadelphia's role in producing billions of coins each year meant that 1985 dimes from this facility are widely available and not considered rare. On the other hand, the Denver Mint marked its coins with the D mint mark, and its 1985 dimes also contributed significantly to the national supply. Minting technology in the 1980s had improved greatly compared to earlier decades, resulting in sharper details, more consistent strikes, and longer die life. However, even with improved machinery, certain die errors and varieties still appeared in 1985, creating interest among collectors. Varieties such as die cracks misaligned, die's weak strikes, and die fatigue can be found in some 1985 dimes, and collectors often search circulation to find these unusual examples. Although not as famous as major error years like 1969 or 1970, the 1985 dime still presents a range of collectible varieties that enrich its numismatic story. When discussing the historical setting of 1985, it is important to remember that the United States Mint was adapting to new challenges, including increased automation, changing metal prices, and growing demand from both domestic and international markets. The Mint was also working on modernizing its production lines, updating its quality control procedures, and experimenting with improvements in die steel and striking pressure. All of these developments influenced how 1985 dimes were manufactured, contributing to their overall consistency and durability. As we explore the design of the 1985 Roosevelt dime, It is worth noting why the original artwork has remained virtually unchanged since 1946. Unlike other denominations that underwent redesigns such as the penny transitioning from wheat to memorial to shield, or the nickel, changing from the buffalo design to the Jefferson design, the Roosevelt dime retained its familiar appearance for decades. This stability reflects both the respect for Roosevelt's legacy and the practical fact that the dime's small size makes redesigns more difficult without sacrificing detail. The obverse of the 1985 dime features Roosevelt facing left with the inscriptions "Liberty" and "In God We Trust," along with the date positioned to the lower right. The reverse design of the torch olive, branch and oak branch continues to symbolize the ideals on which the nation was built: liberty, peace, and strength. The balance among these three elements gives the coin a sense of harmony and purpose. Over the decades since the coin's debut, millions of Americans have handled the Roosevelt dime in everyday transactions, from grocery stores to gas stations to school lunches, making it one of the most familiar pieces of U.S. currency. The story behind the 1985 proof dime from San Francisco adds another layer of interest. Proof coins are not meant for circulation, but for collectors. Proof dimes from 1985 were struck multiple times on polished dies, giving them sharp mirrored fields and frosted details. Collectors value these coins for their beauty, craftsmanship, and preservation of the Roosevelt design. Unlike circulating coins, which may experience wear, scratches, and dents, proof coins remain pristine and display the full artistic detail intended by the designer. Moving into more historical context, the mid-1980s were marked by significant events in the United States and around the world. President Ronald Reagan was in office leading policies focused on economic reform, global diplomacy, and defense. In such a time of development and change, the humble dime continued to serve as a stable and essential part of daily life. The 1985 dime witnessed gas prices fluctuating, new technologies emerging, and American industries shifting toward global integration. In this environment, coins remained tangible reminders of national identity and economic activity. The dime's symbolism carried deep meaning in an era of transformation. Another important aspect of the 1985 dime's history is its role in numismatics. Throughout the 1980s, coin collecting grew steadily, with collectors seeking new varieties, mint sets, proof sets, and error coins. Dimes from the 1980s became part of this growing interest as people assembled date and mint mark collections, studied strike differences, and searched for rare errors. As a result, even ordinary 1985 dimes gained a place in the wider hobby. Connecting the 1985 dime to earlier decades also reveals much about American history. The Roosevelt dime was introduced at the end of World War II when the nation was transitioning to peace and rebuilding its economy. The 1985 dime represents a continuation of that post-war legacy, bridging a period of rapid technological advancement, global change, and growing consumer culture. Even though its appearance stayed the same each decade added new context to the coin's story, the metal composition of the dime in 1985 continued to be copper core with nickel outer layers. The shift away from silver in 1965 had been controversial at the time, but by the 1980s the clad composition was fully accepted and widely used. The absence of silver means that most 1985 dimes carry face value unless in exceptional condition. However, the combination of history design and minting variations still makes this coin a meaningful part of a collection. Looking deeper at minting numbers shows how large the production runs were in the 1980s. Tens of millions of dimes were struck each year, as the mint ensured there were enough coins circulating to meet national demand. The large mintages of the 1985 dime reflect the expanding economy and the increasing use of cash in everyday life. At the same time, credit cards were growing more popular and new electronic systems were emerging, but coins remained essential for vending machines, payphones, transit systems, and retail purchases. The mid-1980s also saw improvements in coin counting and distribution technology. Banks and armored carriers relied on more accurate equipment to sort and deliver coins nationwide, and the dime played a crucial role in these systems. Its small size, ease of handling, and consistent weight made it ideal for bulk processing, and automated machinery coins, like the 1985 dime, helped shape the nation's financial infrastructure. As we reflect on the art, cultural meaning, and minting of the 1985 Roosevelt dime, we see that its story is more than the metal itself. It represents decades of American perseverance, progress, and stability. The Roosevelt design connects generations, reminding us of one of the most influential leaders in U.S. history, while the 1985 minting reflects the economic and industrial landscape of its time. The dime's rich symbolism continues to resonate with collectors, historians, and everyday Americans who use the coin in their daily lives. The 1985 dime serves as a snapshot of the era, capturing the blend of tradition and modernization that defined the decade. It remains not only a piece of currency, but a link to the nation's ongoing story and the legacy of Franklin Delano Roosevelt, whose leadership and vision shaped the modern United States. This continuous connection across decades is what makes the 1985 Roosevelt dime an important part of American numismatic history and a meaningful subject for study, presentation, and storytelling.